We'll wait a few minutes more, or
Four.
who else will be coming in? Ravi?
It's 8:30, right? We have enough people.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So now from Samta, we finished talking about Samta last week, and now we're going into discussion on Dhyan, because Samta is a platform from where you can take off to go into Dhyan and Samadhi eventually. So these are all the steps, but without Samta, nothing is going to happen, because Samta kind of brings your mind at a balance where you don't get affected by the external situations. And until you're going to get influenced by the external situations, your mind is never going to come to a steady state. Until it comes to a steady state, you cannot take off vertically. Otherwise, all this horizontally, all these substances, the objects and the people going to drag you all the time. And your mind will be trying to manage each and every little avenues that it goes into. So that's why we talked about how these objects create a interference in your activity and takes your attention of your mind so much that mind is just not available to take a vertical flight. So Samta will have to come, eventually once you start realizing the futility of the external objects. And so ultimately you have to start putting dhyan. You have to start putting attention to certain objects, right? Now, Jainism divides dhyan into two, Shubh dhyan and Ashubh dhyan. Because they always say dhyan. Dhyan means dhyan, think of Paramatma. That's not true. You could be paying attention to wrong things also. That's also they consider as dhyan. But any dhyan that makes you think of Paramatma and Atma is Shubh dhyan. And anything related to the objects of the world is Ashubh dhyan. So there is a big difference between Shubh and Ashubh, because Shubh is something that makes you pure and makes your mind steady. Ashubh is where you think of the material objects and it makes you impure, because whatever material objects you want, it could be a person, could be money, could be your pleasures. Everybody wants the same object. So there is always a fierce competition. So when there is a competition, your mind is continuously involved and it comes up with all these dirty tricks, how to reach to that spot. So before I want to reach there before somebody else does, I want to take it away. So there is a constant struggle because there is a finite. There is a finite world out there. There is a one pie and you're going to have to share. If you want a bigger share, somebody has to take a smaller share. So there is always going to be, and once you have the object, you don't want to lose it because somebody can take it away. And you think it's a possession, and we make believe this is our possession. And to preserve our possessions, your mind is continuously involved.
Security.
Yeah, so yoga and kshema, that's the cycle that we go through continuously. So it makes your mind impure because you have to come up with, stabbing somebody else, cheating someone else, robbing something else. Even though you know that you're stepping on somebody else's toes, you do it anyway. So directly or indirectly, you're hurting people. But when you're talking about Shubh dhyan, when you're thinking of Atma and Paramatma, Paramatma is unlimited, is infinite. So no matter how much you can have, it's going to be more available. And you don't have to share with anybody because there's so much to share. So everybody can go into dhyan and still it won't be enough for them. Then you can have more because Paramatma is infinite. So when you're talking about infinite, everyone can have enough. Everyone can have happiness at the mind level, at the Shubh dhyan level. Then there is no competition. So then where is the problem? It's only when there is a competition, struggle, that's where all these impure techniques of the mind will start. So that's the difference. Jainism divides into Shubh dhyan and Ashubh dhyan. So now the Ashubh dhyan also they divide it further into two kinds of dhyans. One is called Artha dhyan and one is called Rudra dhyan. So Artha dhyan is where there is a repetition, remembering of the object. And Rudra dhyan is so much repetition and you have so much desire to get that object that you get angry. Rudra Swarup, right? You know how you get angry. So it really is creating a real tanav in your mind. Your mind gets so upset. So that's going into stage from Artha Dhyan into Rudra Dhyan. So those two dhyans consumes our mind all the time. Any object or a person or a situation you cannot get rid of from your mind is Artha Dhyan. Even though, so this is basically living in the past or living in the future. One way or the other, you're drawn by that situation. You want that situation to happen. Either to happen or whatever has happened, you cannot get rid of from your mind. It's continuously playing, and that's called Artha Dhyan. And with the Artha Dhyan, there is no peace. There is no happiness. Not at least in the current moment. The current moment, which is the most precious moment, is robbed away from you because of the Artha Dhyan. So, Arti means pain. It causes pain and suffering at the mind level. That's why they call Artha Dhyan. So, restlessness of acquiring the desired object, and then restlessness, good morning, restlessness to get rid of undesired object or a situation. Here I come. So, one way or the other, it causes the Artha Dhyan. So, Artha Dhyan is any object or a person or a situation that continuously draws your attention. Whether it could be attachment to that object or it could be walking away from that object. But either way, it's taking away from you, right? So, it is the instability of the mind that's more important rather than whether it is generating pleasure or it's generating pain. So, rag or dvesh, they both are unacceptable at the mind level. So, you may say that, yeah, what's wrong with having a pleasure? Nothing wrong with having a pleasure in a material way. But you have to realize to do that, your mind has to be occupied. Mind has to be occupied because it has to have that particular object for the pleasure. Now you say, if I'm having a good time, what's wrong with that? The wrong thing is the perspective. See, when you're not happy and say you want to walk away from, like alcohol is giving you the cirrhosis of the liver and now you want to give it up and now it's giving you the pain and suffering because you cannot give it up. Understandable, you want to walk away, you cannot, you're suffering. But so what's wrong with when you're having a good time? I'm enjoying life, what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong from the world perspective. You are happy, you're having a good time, fine. But your mind, that mind is still occupied by that object, and only from samadhi point of view, if you want to have a perpetual source of pleasure, then there is something wrong. Because that pleasure is your own pleasure. And that pleasure, you don't have to depend on anybody or anything else. It's a perpetual source of pleasure. And that you can have only by yourself. You don't need any object. It's like the spider legs. The spider having 6 legs continuously has to use the legs to walk on the objects to go from one place to another. But it still needs to have a support. Every leg has to rest on some steady object. Otherwise, he cannot go anywhere. So he needs the objects to support himself. But only when he spins the thread and goes to the higher level, attaches somewhere else, that's when he takes off. And he doesn't need any of those crutches. So that kind of pleasure, if you want it, then any of these things is a problem. Then it's Artha Dhyan. Artha Dhyan means any involvement of the mind that catches your attention, that's Artha Dhyan. So we talked about the past, the present, and the future, right? What is preventing you from being in the present is your attachment to the objects. Any objects that is in front of you, if it's going to create an attachment, then there is a problem, because tomorrow
it might not be there.
You will be still thinking about that object. So it's drawing you into the past. So the kind of life you want to live in the present moment, where you go from moment to the moment to the moment. So by going ahead and in getting involved with the objects that has a potential to draw your attention and take you into Artha Dhyan, you want to stay away from it. That is the reason. Because then your mind is not going to be available tomorrow to do your job when you're still thinking of Black Label or Google or whatever, right? Your mind is, I gave you the example, right? When I didn't have the Google, it was fine. The moment I bought the Google, I'm continuously thinking, what is it doing? And I'm checking the stock prices on the internet. And The patient is there. You know? So it's taking you away from the present moment. The present moment is meant to do your duties, and it's not allowing you to do that. The Artha Dhyan kills you. It robs you of the potential pleasure that you could have at the moment for being what you could be at your best. For me, to be the best possible doctor, if that's the pleasure that I should have, I'm being robbed away. So Artha Dhyan of any other objects, stocks, no stocks, people, situations, anything, that's creating the Artha Dhyan. Now the Artha Dhyan is a mild degree of, it's just involvement. But when your involvement with that object or a person or a situation becomes so much, it turns into Rudra Dhyan. Because then you're going into a higher state of involvement. Now the object is making you turn around. So that's why we always say, Dhyato Vishayam Punsa. The objects of pleasure has grabbed you. Now your mind is dancing to the tunes of those objects. And in that dancing, you forget it. Your mind is taken over. It's like a hostage to the outside. And then there is no, so then anybody who comes and interferes in that situation, you're going to be angry. And at that time, it really doesn't matter. It could be your wife, could be your husband, could be your children, could be your patient. No matter how many people with well-wishers will tell you that this is good, this is not good, you should be doing. You just laugh it off and keep doing what you're doing anyway.
It's like a TV.
And yeah, something like that. Yeah, and
It
then
controls
you. It's an addiction.
Addiction.
So,
you cannot live without it.
Cannot live without it, right? So.
Or iPhone. Or iPhone.
So, rag or dvesh. See, rag is something that you have attachment and you think you're generating pleasure out of it. Or dvesh, that you walk away from the object that is hurting you. Either way is going to interfere with the samadhi. Because rag and dvesh is a creation of the mind. One object I might enjoy right now, the same object may be giving me the pain tomorrow. We don't know. So it's a state of mind. See, if you really, Yoga Vasistha is saying that good, bad, ugly, friend, no friend, enemy, those are all relative terms. Those are all relative. Day and night are relative terms. Death and birth are relative terms. It's all creation of the mind. There is no death. There is no sunset. There is no sunrise. So these are all concepts the mind has generated. The sun doesn't set or rise. It's our belief. Because we are rotating. So we finish, it's a rotation of the earth along with us. It has nothing to do with the sun. But there is a sunrise and there is a sunset. But it's an imagination. It's a total imagination. And what an imagination. Because that imagination has created so many days and so many cycles and so many calendars and so many past memories and all graphically, noticed by the calendars and Roman calendars, Jewish calendar, that it's been going on for thousands of years and it's going to go on for thousands of years. How many civilizations, rise and falls have been decided by this single phenomenon of sunset and sunrise. If you get above it, what is there? It's just a concept. So when you transcend the mind, there is no day or night. So all these concepts we live by, same thing, rag and dvesh. It doesn't matter whether the object is liked by you or disliked by you. It doesn't matter. As long as it's drawing your attention, that's bad enough for samadhi. You cannot reach samadhi if any object is playing around with you, one way or the other. So the thing is that the people are afraid though, because they say, what will happen if I give up these objects and I don't find anything? Once I do the meditation, I go inside, I don't find anything. What do I do? So then you lose out both ways. Say, I lost all the pleasures and now I didn't get anything this way anyway. So that's why people are afraid. Because people are, they define themselves by their minds. I give the example. See, J.J. Krishnamurti, one guy come in to ask him. He says he's a 30-some-year-old and has an affair and he's not sure if the girl will say yes or not. He has a good job, but he's always unsteady, unsure what's going to happen in the job. How much are they, and I have to take care of my parents. How long they're going to live. So there are like multiple avenues that most of the people face on a day-to-day basis. So J.J. Krishnamurti does not give him a straight answer. He says, what do I do? Why do I have these anxieties and fears and this and that and all those things, right? So he says, I will let you think. He says, in every situation that you go through, what will happen, supposing, say you don't get the same girl that you really want? What will happen if you lose your job? What will happen if your parents will die at some point, and which we know they will? and all those things. What if you don't have enough money for support yourself for the future? What is going to happen? So the guy says, then what is left in life? Then I will disappear, basically. It's such a silly argument because all these things will be gone. He will still exist. So what will happen? So every bad situation or good situation is evaluated by the mind. The mind means capital I. I want that girl. I want that job. I want certain security. I want financial. I want my parents. I. It's all along the mind that's playing. We never dissociate ourselves from the mind. So Krishnamurti tells the guy, so that means then you are all these things, right? You are a son, you are a potential husband, you are an employee, you are this, and you're playing all these roles, and that's all you are, right? He says, yeah, after that I'll be finished if I don't have any of these things. So he's so much relying on the external situation and the objects that this is his identity. This is all he thinks of himself. And when you go beyond that, that's when your realization comes in. But then the guy himself comes out and he says, this is so silly. And he realizes that he's saying, but he's saying it so wrong. We need external situation to define ourselves, except we don't know that there was ourselves, before all these things started. When we were born, we didn't have name, we didn't have social security number, we didn't have a job, we were not a doctor, we didn't know what we were, and yet we existed. So that existence itself is the realization of the samadhi. And that's where we should go. So once you realize where you are wrong, that's when you can take off. But people are not sure. Because what is happening in samadhi, there is a death of the ego. This is not the death of the body. They said this is mahamrutyu. Mrutyu is only to the body. But mahamrutyu is the death of the ego. The ego dies. And that's the real death. After that death, you don't have to be born again. Because ego is gone, there is no desire left anymore. But people are always afraid. So Rajneesh gives an example of Mullah Nasruddin. He was traveling in a train and the ticket collector comes in to check the tickets. So Mullah Nasruddin has coats and multiple pockets and he doesn't remember where he kept his tickets, right? So he's checking this pocket and that pocket and then this pocket and that pocket, and like 15 minutes the guy is standing there looking at him. Sir, please hurry up. He says, yeah, I'm checking. Can't remember where I put in this and that. He says, Mahashaya, I'm noticing there's one pocket you have not. Oh yeah, I can't touch that. That's the last pocket. What if there's no ticket there? Then I'm really in trouble. So people are afraid to go in just for the reason that they're not going to find anything.
Yeah.
So that's one pocket I cannot touch. What if there is no ticket? Then I'm really in trouble. I want to keep it that way. So it's so silly, right? We are afraid to go inside because it's the mind that is preventing you from going inside.
He wants to survive.
Because mind wants to survive. Mind has survived for thousands of years. The ego has been generated through multiple lives, animal lives and potential so many lives. The ego has been created. It doesn't want to disappear just overnight. So it's not going to happen overnight. So you have to require to go to that steady state. The samta. Samta has to be developed because at the samta level you don't need ego. You just observing the situation, you are not reacting to the situation. So the problem is the mind is responsible for a lot of conflicts that go on in life. Mind holds on to its ego, and ego is defined by individual vrittis. Your vrittis are different than my vrittis. My ideas about life are totally different than your ideas. And yet at one point we all were same. But we branched out from our experiences, liking, disliking, has created millions of people, totally individual, totally separate from each other. So conflicts take place when our vrittis are different. Like we always give an example. You go in a town for the first time. If two people love to go to a bar, me and Deepak could be hanging out going to the bar. But if you believe in temples, you'll be going to the temple, you'll be looking for his company. Whatever. So it depends upon your vrittis, you find the avenues. So whenever we are born with certain vrittis. Vrittis of drinking, vrittis of gambling, vrittis of studying, vrittis of whatever. It could be anything, vasanas, indulgences, whatever may be, but we are born with those vrittis. So those vrittis are the propelling factor for us for our behavior. So now two people come in with different set of vrittis. So they are conditioned kind of. They are conditioned by their vrittis. So conditioning, there is a conflict of conditioning. One person looks this way, another person looks that way, and two people are brought in together and get married. What do you expect? There's always going to be conflict because the way you look at things are going to be totally different than the way somebody else looks at it. And then there is a conflict. So the basis of the conflict is the asymmetrical situation, where any situation is generated, two different responses are generated. Husband and wife may have a fight, right? At the end of 2 hours, wife says, enough is enough. I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Husband says, enough is enough. I'm going to go to bed. I have to go to work tomorrow. 2 minutes he's snoring. And wife cannot sleep all night. He said this and she said that and I only said that and it goes on all night. She can't sleep. Same situation, different responses. So again, it's all the vrittis. Vrittis of one person is totally different. So there is a conflict. So the conflict is because of differential conditioning. So conditioning of the mind. In samta, we want to get rid of the conditioning. When the conditions are removed, you become like a child. You reach to a steady state. You are nirmal. You are nirdosh. You are not affected by anything. You don't have any prejudices against anyone. Like that. So, conflict is created by, but we always look at the conflict. For us, that is the real thing. We always worry why the conflicts are there. Why am I having this argument? This and that. But we never go to the root of the problem. So I was reading in J.J. Krishnamurti. He analyzes so beautiful.